In this place and every place, I might live and breathe the gospel of Jesus Christ. Amen. Well, so we didn't have the phrase fishers of men in there, did we? We had some translation differences between the pulpit Bible and the pew Bible, as usual. So again, those scriptures are aimed at the issue of how we are called and to what purpose we are called. That calling and that sense of purpose will be under great scrutiny in the coming weeks. As we said last week, we are preparing for an important special conference in the United Methodist Church that'll be held in St. Louis at the end of the month. I'll be attending this. It means I'll be gone on Sunday, February 24th, and then I'll report back to all of you the following week about what happened here. And then we're going to move forward with our Lenten worship series at the beginning of March. So for anyone who missed last week's discussion, we'll give a brief summary. Your sermon title, The Commission on a Way Forward, is a special council of United Methodist bishops who have been tasked with providing a framework for the church to address the issue of same-sex marriage. This has been an ongoing issue for many years now. Our book of discipline currently states that the practice of homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. Many progressive clergy and laity have worked for years to see this changed, and many, including your own pastor, are hoping that this conference can be the moment where this language will be removed from the book of discipline. We view it as harmful language. So the United Methodist Church is a very large and a very diverse global body. So change comes very slowly, and it's very difficult. Through prayer and persistence, and by refusing to be silenced on this matter, LGBTQ pastors and members and their allies have furthered this discussion to the point where they have a chance to effect real change at this special general conference. But nothing is certain. Yesterday, I was able to attend a gathering of the Michigan delegation of MFSA, the Methodist Federation for Social Action. And it featured a panel of LGBTQ clergy whose spiritual journeys have been deeply affected, if not entirely defined, by this fight. These are lifelong United Methodist clergy and lifelong United Methodist members. They didn't just pop up. They've been here all along. It was a moving and an eye-opening experience, and it highlights the real challenge of this moment in the church. And that challenge is the need to hear the voices and the stories of these individuals who have been harmed by this doctrine, and to include these voices in this discussion rather than treating these individuals as the objects of the debate. These are real people with real stories, and their lives have been turned upside down because of their home church's position. They have had to hide who they are. They have risked, in many cases, their careers and their livelihoods by coming out, and they have faced punishment and persecution at multiple turns. They are also, by the way, some of the most passionate and committed Christians you will ever meet. Now, in some ways, so those are my takeaways from this discussion, and have been my takeaways from these kinds of discussions. In some ways, I feel that our congregation has somewhat passed this debate. I sense that we maybe worked through this, if not formally, then internally, probably within the last 10 or 15 years. No doubt some of you are surprised to learn that the United Methodist Church is still behind on this issue. And no doubt there are still probably some disagreements in our congregation about where the church should come down on this. Those disagreements will probably center around how we interpret and apply our biblical scriptures, what kind of weight we give to Old Testament passages and gospel passages that seem contradictory, and even around our interpretation of sin and the Wesleyan doctrine of grace and divine forgiveness. So those are all important, fundamental, theological things that we're still working through. But the bottom line of this moment, the real reality is that no amount of logical or theoretical debate, no amount of biblical study or theology can take the place of meeting these LGBTQ individuals where they are in real time, of talking with them and hearing their stories, learning of their pain, and bearing witness to their commitment to the gospel of Christ. That gospel calls us to make disciples in his name for the transformation of the world. Transformation. Transformation is what happens when you hold these conversations and include these voices in them. It's not transactional. It's not structural. It's transformative. So it's not about changing minds or winning the academic debate. It is about changing hearts and transforming and healing souls. So that's my sermon for today. That's my preaching for today. We have a few minutes here, and I know many of you are curious about this. So to this end, there are 3 proposals that have been put forth by this commission of bishops, and they're all receiving consideration in St. Louis. Any one of them could be adopted, or none of them could be adopted. We're going to look at 2 of them briefly today and conclude with the 3rd one next week. So Tim is going to bring up a PowerPoint in a moment. We're going to look at them. But before we do that, I want to reiterate a very important point. In everything they have done, the bishops have worked to keep the unity of the church intact and to preserve its infrastructure for the large majority of congregations whose local ministry won't change based on this conference. Ours is one of those churches. We're not going to be forced to do anything we don't want to do. This is an important event in the life and history of the church, but it does not change or define who we are as a local congregation. The work we do in Walled Lake remains the same. So we'll bring up these plans. The proposals are titled this way: 1, the One Church Plan; 2, the Traditionalist Plan; and 3, the Connectional Conference Plan. The One Church Plan, in my experience and in my discussions, is the most desirable of the 3. It's the plan that has been endorsed officially by the bishops themselves. The commission has recommended the One Church Plan. It's the most contextual, and it does the least harm to our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. It seeks to help this cause, and it would change some of the language in the Book of Discipline. However, it still doesn't do quite enough to protect these individuals across different ministry settings. So it is a step in the right direction, and it is the plan that we're going to discuss in detail next week. For today, we're going to look at the other 2, the Traditionalist Plan and the Connectional Conference Plan. So the Traditionalist Plan, I apologize if this writing is too small for you. I'm going to take you through it here. There's a little summary of some of the points. The primary action, and this is important, for this plan is accountability to the current Book of Discipline language. Not, mind you, accountability to the gospel of Jesus Christ, but to the Book of Discipline. It would broaden the definition of self-avowed practicing homosexuals to include persons living in same-sex marriages or civil unions, or persons who publicly state that they are practicing homosexuals. It would mandate that any just resolution includes a commitment not to repeat this perceived offense. and it would require annual conferences to certify that they will uphold, enforce, and maintain the discipline's standards on LGBTQ marriage and ordination. Many annual conferences have already refused to certify this upholding. So a couple more points for this on the next slide, Tim. Annual conferences that do not certify so will be encouraged to form something like an autonomous or affiliated or concordant church. And this would seek to distinguish those churches apart from United Methodist churches. But I want to reiterate, we will not be required to do the same thing that our annual conference does in this unlikely event. It would also require bishops to certify that they would uphold the discipline on these particular issues. Bishops who do not do so wouldn't be eligible for compensation in 2021, and they would be encouraged to join this autonomous or concordant church formed by the annual conferences. So, that all sounds a little scary and a little harsh, and that's because it is. This coded, if I may, this coded language of encouragement at the end here is really a kind of language of coercion that is seeking to maintain control in an area where we are losing control, or where this group feels it is losing control. And before we continue, I want to point out something else about the traditionalist plan, and that is that it has had the least amount of support among the three proposals from the bishops. So on the next slide, we'll see an important note here. This request to include a full traditionalist plan was received by the Commission prior to its last meeting in 2018. They have registered this concern, which at the time said that they didn't allow for a full conciliar process that they had allowed for the other two plans. In other words, the One Church Plan and the Connectional Conference Plan both received intensive and comprehensive participation from the Commission and the Council of Bishops over an extended period of time, whereas the Traditionalist Plan didn't. The reason for that is that there was some support within the Commission and the Council for the Traditionalist model, but not enough to continue fleshing it out the same way they did with these other two plans. But in order to meet the request from the Council of Bishops, the Commission resubmitted the Traditionalist plan later on, fleshing it out a little bit more. So we can move on to the next slide, Tim. Thank you. So again, this is summarizing this issue. The Commission on a Way Forward developed a smaller sketch of this plan that was originally submitted, but it was reported that the Council of Bishops did not vote on or express any preference on the models, but when asked which ones they should develop further, the One Church sketch and the multi-branch or connectional sketch were the focus. Those ones were developed fully into plans for consideration by the Council of Bishops in February 2018. The multi-branch was renamed. But at the May meeting of the Council of Bishops, the Commission was asked to provide a more fleshed out traditionalist plan. And so they have done that. So that is the traditionalist plan in a nutshell. We're also going to look at the connectional conference plan. Summary of this plan. This one's a little more complicated. It reflects a unified core that includes shared doctrine and services. This plan creates 3 values-based connectional conferences that have distinctive definitions of accountability, contextualization, and justice. Current central conferences have the choice of becoming their own connectional conference or joining one of the 3 values-based connectional conferences. A redefined Council of Bishops focus on ecumenical relationships and shared learning. Episcopal oversight, accountability, elections, assignments, and funding occur within the College of Bishops for each connectional conference. This all sounds a little complicated, and it is. So a few more features of this plan. There are currently 5 U.S. jurisdictions. We're in the North Central jurisdiction. They'd be replaced by 3 connectional conferences, each covering the whole country. So this one really seeks to contextualize things within the United States in particular, because the United States churches are the most diverse on this issue. Based on theology, including perspectives on LGBTQ ministry. Each connectional conference creates its own book of discipline, which would begin with the general book of discipline, the worldwide one, including articles of religion, confessions of faith, general rules, and other items commonly agreed upon. Each connectional conference also has the authority to adapt those items not included in the general Book of Discipline. And a few more points about this one. Apologies again if you're having trouble reading. Connectional conferences at their discretion could have separate connectional conference judicial courts with authority in rulings related to the Connectional Conference Book of Discipline. Such rulings are appealed to the Judicial Council. That's like the Supreme Court of the United Methodist Church. Justice ministries related to racism, sexism are organized at the Connectional Conference level and held accountable by the General Church. In addition to the shared doctrine and shared services, each connectional conference has its own structure, agencies, and method of financing its ministry and shared services, as well as support for bishops and annual conferences outside the United States. Each connectional conference has its own policies regarding LGBTQ weddings and ordination. So that is those two plans. Next week, we're going to look at the one church plan. If you are interested in exploring these plans in further detail, you can look them up on the General Conference website or on the Michigan United Methodist Church website. You could Google United Methodist General Conference or Commission on a Way Forward, our sermon title. That's the group of bishops that have put these together. There is a 93-page PDF that you can download that goes through all of these. 93 pages that you can power read or scan through or something, like you're studying for a test. So you can go through those in greater detail, but those are the basic ideas of these first two plans. I am in favor of the third one that we're going to go through next week. I'm not on the side of the traditionalist plan, and I have concerns about the connectional conference plan because it restructures things in an ideological way rather than asking us to remain unified in a church among others of differing opinions. And we have had this kind of structure before in the past, and it wasn't good. We had a central conference that was a racially segregated conference that took up all black United Methodist churches in the United States. We've done things like that before, and it's never a good idea. So each of these plans has its issues. None of them is perfect, including the one we'll go through next week. The traditionalist plan, it really would be a nightmare for all of our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, as well as all those of us who consider ourselves allies. There is no sugarcoating that. The connectional conference plan sounds reasonable enough, but it would be a logistical nightmare that would separate us ideologically rather than keeping us unified. The one church plan is what most are hoping for, and we'll discuss that next week. But as we do, and as this conference does, we will keep in mind the message of the gospel, the grace of God and the love of Christ, and we will pray for our church, our small church, and our larger church as it goes forward into this sacred time. So take some deep breaths. Remember that our local ministry will remain unchanged. And remember that God and Christ are with us in every step of this process. Thanks be to God, and amen.